Imagine waking up to the sound of the wind slicing through the fjords. Your body, still young, already bears the scars of battle, not against enemies, but against the cold, the hunger, and the harshness of life itself. There is no room for weakness here. Brutality isn't the exception, it's the rule. You were born to fight, born to bleed. Your days are forged in iron and mud, and your nights are soaked in tales of gods and monsters, though none more terrifying than the fate of a cowardly warrior. Because in your world, dying without honor is worse than death itself. Today, you will live like a Viking, but not like the movies show. No glamorous heroes or clean battles. Today, you'll dive into the dirty, brutal, and unforgiving reality of those born to wage war, to raid distant lands, and to stare death in the face, axe in hand and fear hidden behind shield. You'll discover what it meant to grow up in a society where strength was worth more than gold. You'll feel the weight of a sword before you even know how to write your name. And in the end, the question won't be whether the Vikings were savage, but whether you could survive even a single day as one of them. Prepare to cross through ice and blood, because now the journey begins. Even before learning to walk, a Viking child was already being prepared for the harshness of life. The cradle wasn't made of luxury, but of rough wood, wrapped in animal furs and the constant scent of smoke and sweat. Medieval Scandinavia didn't offer comfort. It offered resilience, and survival was the first great test. Being born into a Viking clan meant your worth as a person would be measured from the start, not through words, but through actions. Boys were watched closely. Could they endure the cold without crying? Withstand pain without complaint? Did they have a steady gaze? Every little detail could be a sign that a warrior was being born or not. Girls, on the other hand, faced their own trials. Though many were trained to care for the home and land, some wielded swords, handled shields, and when needed, fought alongside men. Equality wasn't an idea. It was necessity. Everyone had to be strong. Everyone had to be ready. From an early age, children's games mimicked war. They played with sticks like swords, set up ambushes between the trees, and learned to aim with wooden spears. The goal? To teach strategy, courage, and above all, composure. Injuries? Part of the lesson. Fear? A feeling to be eliminated. And then came the cold. Relentless. The Scandinavian winter showed no mercy to the weak. Children were trained to withstand extreme temperatures, sleeping under minimal covers or walking barefoot through snow. This is how a warrior began to be forged, through the endurance of both body and mind. Inside the home, parents told stories, but not fairy tales. They were legends of warriors who fought to their last breath, who faced dragons and giants, and who died in battle with a smile on their lips, ready to enter the golden halls of Valhalla. These stories weren't just for entertainment. They taught the Viking moral code: live with bravery, die with honor. Adolescence didn't exist as we know it today. By the age of 12, a young person was already held accountable for their actions. They could hunt, defend their village, and even join expeditions. By that age, many had already killed animals, enemies, or both. In Viking culture, there was no time to grow up slowly. You either grew up fast or you perished. And it was precisely that early brutality that shaped men and women capable of facing the unimaginable. Because for a Viking, every day was a battle, and war was destiny. But growing up was only the beginning, because after childhood came the true preparation. And that's when the blood really began to boil. If childhood was the testing ground, youth was the ultimate forge. A Viking warrior wasn't born ready. He was carved through pain, discipline, and blood. It was in this phase that a boy became a man. And the preparation wasn't symbolic. It was brutal, relentless, and merciless. Slowly, play fighting with sticks turned into real weapon training. Sharp swords, battle axes, spears with fire-hardened tips. Each weapon had a purpose. Each demanded a unique technique. Learning to wield a sword required strength, yes, but also precision. A poorly placed strike could mean death. And the axe, The axe was the ultimate symbol of Viking terror. Heavy, unbalanced, ruthless, but in the right hands, it was lethal. Then there was the shield. More than protection, it was an extension of the body, used to block, to push, to crush. The Viking shield was round, made of tough wood, covered in leather, and fitted with an iron boss at the center. Its use was essential in shield wall formations, where warriors stood side by side, like a living wall. But mastering weapons was only half the battle. The body had to endure the rigors of war too. That's why young Vikings ran long distances while carrying weight, swam in freezing waters, and faced endurance trials that would break many. Collapsing from exhaustion was normal. Complaining? Never. Diet was part of the training as well. Dried meat, smoked fish, barley porridge, roots, and goat's milk. It wasn't a varied menu, but it was high energy. It sustained strength and endurance during long campaigns. The most revered drink? Mead, a fermented mix of honey and water, consumed during rituals and celebrations. There was also the psychological ritual. A Viking warrior had to kill before he hesitated. So some were placed face-to-face with wild animals to test their courage. Others were thrown into mock ambushes, learning to stay calm amid chaos. Fear was taught to be controlled, not ignored, but confronted and transformed into fury. And then, before the first real battle, came the rituals. Some received sacred symbols carved into their skin. Others invoked Odin's blessing, offering animal blood or personal items as sacrifice. It was a preparation not only of the body, but of the spirit. They believed that when they went to war, their gods fought alongside them. As for the famous horned helmet, pure fiction. Real Viking warriors wore simple helmets made of iron or leather, reinforced to protect the head, no fancy ornaments. In actual battle, style didn't matter. Survival did. By the end of this training, the youth was no longer just a son of the village. He was a warrior, a predator, someone ready to make the enemy bleed or bleed trying. And when that moment finally came, it was time to step into his first battle. No training, no matter how brutal, could fully prepare a young Viking for his first real battle. The smell of fresh blood, the metallic clash of blades, the screams of war and agony alike were impossible to simulate. It was a baptism by chaos, a one-way passage. Before departure, the clan gathered. It was a time for blessings, for vows, and for silence. Each warrior looked into the eyes of their family, as if for the last time, because it very well could be. The ships lined up along narrow rivers and seas, their sails marked with runic symbols, their prows carved into dragon heads. The mission? Raid, conquer, or defend. The motivation? Honor, survival, and glory. For a young warrior, being chosen to join such an expedition was the highest honor and the ultimate test. At sea, they faced biting cold, violent waves, and often weeks without setting foot on land. Hunger gnawed at them, fatigue ruled their bodies. But none of those hardships compared to the moment the enemy appeared on the horizon. When the Vikings landed, there was no mercy. Battle began with a roar of fury, literally. Many warriors entered a trance, howling like beasts, painting their faces, pounding their chests. Some claimed to be possessed by gods, or by the spirits of wolves and bears. These were the berserkers, warriors who fought in a frenzied rage, capable of killing without pain, without hesitation. In the midst of it all stood the young Viking, shield raised, axe in hand, heart pounding to the edge of bursting. The first clash was always unforgettable. The impact of body against body, the sound of bones snapping, the world reduced to a blur of mud, blood, and steel. Viking battles were short but intense. The shield wall was crucial in the beginning, but soon dissolved into chaotic one-on-one combat. There, brute force met cunning. One wrong step, one slip, and death came without ceremony. There were no glorious heroes, only survivors. Bodies piled up, screams echoed through the trees and stones, and the rain often seemed to fall only to wash the blood from the earth. But to a Viking, dying in battle was an honor. If he fell fighting, his soul would be carried by Valkyries to Valhalla, where endless feasts and eternal battles awaited. That belief fueled their courage. Many preferred to die with a sword in hand than live in fear. And if he survived, then he was welcome home as a true man. The village celebrated. He had stared death in the face and returned. He had conquered fear, and now his name carried weight. Respect, maybe even fear. But war didn't end there. It left marks, scars both seen and unseen. That young man didn't come back the same. No Viking ever did. And so, after the bloodshed and the glory, came something even more feared than battle itself. Living with the consequences. Because the gods might reward the warrior with victory, but it was life after the fight that demanded the highest price. When the sword was sheathed and the axe laid to rest, the silence that followed battle wasn't peace. It was emptiness. For many Viking warriors, returning to the village didn't mark the end, but the beginning of a new kind of fight, an invisible war. Those who came back alive were welcomed as heroes. Villagers gathered around them with awe. Children saw them as living legends. Elders paid them silent reverence. Their stories became part of oral tradition, told around the fire with vivid details of courage, fury, and glory. But amid the applause and the feasts, there was a silence no one dared to question. Many warriors no longer slept the same. Nightmares haunted them. The smell of blood, the sound of bones snapping, the eyes of the enemy dying in their arms. These memories didn't fade with time. Without a modern name for it, they called it a curse from the gods. But today we know what it was. Trauma, the soul crying out for healing. Something no blade or muscle could provide. And then there were the physical scars. Missing limbs, infected wounds, bones that never healed right. There were no doctors, only healers, roots, mud, and faith. Those who survived crippled were often met with pity, but also discomfort. They reminded everyone of the price of war. Still, glory spoke louder. A warrior who proved his worth in battle was rewarded with land, wives, respect, and rank. He could become a chieftain, an advisor, or even be remembered in songs passed down through generations. He was a living trophy, a symbol of bravery and sacrifice. And in the middle of that recognition, a new role emerged. The mentor. Many veterans began training the young, passing down the same lessons they once received, but now with scars that serve as warnings. Their eyes said, "It takes more than strength to survive." Their spirituality often changed too. Some grew more devout, thanking the gods for each day they still breathed. Others grew skeptical, having seen devout friends fall like any other man. Some sought meaning in deeper rituals. Others isolated themselves, trying to make sense of it all. And in the end, one question haunted them all. Was it worth it? The answer was rarely spoken aloud, but it could be found in the distant gaze, the trembling hand that touched a blade, the long sigh before telling yet another story of war. Because to live as a Viking warrior was, indeed, to earn honor, but it also meant carrying the weight of every life taken, every friend lost, every battle won at a cost only the soul could measure. And for some, that burden was heavier than any war. In Viking culture, death was not the end. It was the crossing. And for a warrior, dying with honor was as vital as fighting with courage. It was the only path to Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where the bravest would continue to battle and feast for all eternity. But dying wasn't enough. One had to die the right way. Standing, weapon in hand, facing danger without fear. To die in old age, in bed, was seen as sorrowful, even shameful. That's why many aging warriors, already weakened, would seek out one final battle, a last act of bravery that sealed their fate with glory. When a warrior fell, grief would sweep through the village, but not for long. Sorrow gave way to rituals, solemn and deeply respected. The body was washed and dressed in its finest clothing, often in armor. Important objects were placed beside it. His sword, his shield, and personal tokens, rings, coins, and memories. These items are not mere symbols. They were believed to accompany the warrior on his journey beyond, helping him fight and live once more in Valhalla. Then came the final resting place, and here traditions varied. Some were buried beneath stones shaped like ships, symbolizing the spiritual voyage. Others were laid in real boats, surrounded by their belongings. And in extreme cases, even slaves or animals were sacrificed. The vessel was then set ablaze, sliding across the water as flames reached the sky. The rising smoke became the path to the gods. During the rites, priests and seers performed chants, spoke prayers, and offered sacrifices to ensure the fallen would be accepted by the divine. It was a powerful, solemn spectacle, with a whole village gathered to honor the warrior. But there was a darker side. Those who did not die in battle, who passed from illness, age, or accident, were often excluded from the grandest rituals. Some were buried quietly, with little ceremony, as if an unworthy death had erased part of their legacy. For a Viking, that was one of the greatest tragedies imaginable. Yet with time, some clans reinterpreted the customs. The ancient sagas spoke of how even gods could die, and that every death, even the quiet ones, held meaning. And so, over the generations, many came to honor, not just those who died with honor, but those who lived with it. Because in the end, a Viking death was a reflection of an entire life. And if that life was marked by courage, sacrifice, and loyalty, then battle or not, that warrior had earned his place among the great. In Viking society, youth was the peak of glory, a time when the body was swift, the mind fierce, and the sword answered every threat with strength. But what happened when the years passed? When muscles lost their edge, and the warrior began to feel the weight of ancient battles? Aging was a harsh reality. For many Vikings, there was no retirement, only a slower rhythm, yet still a demanding life. Veteran warriors who had survived countless fights took on new roles: advisors, clan leaders, battle trainers, respected elders. But that respect came at a cost, because many feared appearing weak, and weakness was a heavy burden. Some couldn't bear the physical decline. There are tales of warriors who, feeling their bodies fail, asked to die in combat or set out on impossible expeditions, not out of madness, but by choice. A final act of bravery, ending life as they had lived it. Others found purpose in passing on knowledge, training the young, keeping the flame of their legacy alive. But not all veterans were remembered. Some, wounded or marked by defeat, faded into obscurity. In a culture that worshipped strength, being seen as fragile could be a fate worse than death. Still, there were exceptions. Great warriors were immortalized in sagas, not only for how they lived, but for how they faced the end. One legendary example is Egil Skallagrimsson, a poet and warrior who lived into old age, blind and nearly powerless. Yet he continued to recite powerful verses, challenging kings with his words, proving that strength could live in the mind and soul. His story echoes as proof that not every Viking had to die young to be remembered as a hero. But the truth was the same for all. Death would come, sooner or later. The Vikings' fight wasn't only against enemies. It was against time, against being forgotten, against the fear of becoming ordinary. Because to a Viking, to die was not to fail, but to stop fighting was. Now that we've explored the brutal and challenging life of the Vikings, the question remains: do you have what it takes to survive as a Viking? Imagine yourself on a battlefield, sword in hand, facing not only enemies but constant pain and fear. Imagine being tested by an unpredictable world where every day is a fight for survival. Could you bear the weight of your scars and your honor? Would you face death head-on, knowing each moment might be your last? Being a Viking wasn't just about fighting. It was about enduring pain, loss, and the brutality of life, while standing firm in your mission to leave a legacy. It wasn't only what you conquered, but how you faced the inevitable. The Viking was forged by adversity, and their true strength came from how they dealt with relentless fate. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you hold strong? If you were a Viking, could you endure what they faced? The pain, the fears, the daily struggles? Or would you give in to the weight of brutality and violence? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Share your ideas and tell me if you enjoyed this video about Viking culture. And if you want more videos like this, don't forget to ask, because few could endure all of it. But you? Are you one of them?